Now, taking the knee is something that has dominated the headlines this week. The Proteas might have won their first T20 World Cup match on Tuesday, but all the limelight was really stolen by the withdrawal of wicketkeeper-batsman Quinton de Kock before their match against the West Indies. To help us understand this episode, we have joining us on the line Cricket South Africa Chairperson Lawson Naidoo. Good morning, Lawson, and welcome to Sports on Morning Live.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Now, Lawson, I remember having a discussion with you about a year ago, and this was at the time that the Proteas had opted to wear a black armband instead of taking the knee. And it was also before you were appointed as the chairperson of CSA. And I remember you were so outraged, and you said that Cricket South Africa needed to be decisive on the issue as a matter of urgency. So my question is to you, what happened now? Because this is almost a year later. We have a Proteas side that went into the World Cup with what can be seen as a confusing message. Some are doing the power salute, some are taking the knee, and some are just standing. Why couldn't this issue be solved before going into the World Cup?
Yeah. What has been happening over the last year since that moment where the players wore black armbands is there have been ongoing discussions within the team environment amongst the players themselves to try and reach a consensus on a uniform gesture that they could all agree upon and implement. And we saw it on one or two occasions where they did do that. But it was clear that they were unable to sustain that, and that the team ultimately opted to demonstrate different gestures. And I think the images we saw from last Saturday's game, the opening game of the World Cup against Australia, sent out a signal of a team that was not in harmony, it was perceived as being disorganized. We had some players taking the knee with fists raised, we had some players standing with fists raised, others standing with their hands behind their backs. And, this portrayed an image of South African cricket that we do not want to see on the international stage. We're in the middle of a World Cup. Taking the knee has become an acknowledged worldwide gesture against racism. And we feel that South Africa, of all countries in the world, should be taking a lead in this regard and should be taking the knee. And that is why we only issued a directive earlier this week, because we wanted to give the players the time to come to a consensus view amongst themselves. So it was only when it became abundantly clear to us that they were unable to reach consensus that the board decided that it needed to intervene.
So Quinton is still with the team, and we assume that at some point the board would have had a discussion with him alongside some other senior team members. What was his position beforehand on taking the knee and at the time that the directive was issued? Because we know we live in South Africa, a country where freedom of choice is really a fundamental human right. And was there any consultation that took place with the team members before that directive was issued?
No, there was there was no consultation with team members before the board issued that directive. I'm not sure. I can't speak for Quinton de Kock in terms of his thought processes when he decided not to make himself available for the game against the West Indies on Tuesday. But we communicated that decision to the coach, to the captain, the director of cricket, as well as the team manager on Tuesday morning ahead of the game. The issue is that on Tuesday evening, accompanied by two other board members, I met with all of the players that are in the UAE at the moment through a virtual link, and we had an extensive discussion where I and my fellow directors explained to the players the rationale behind what we were asking them to do, why it was so important for a team that is representing South Africa on the international stage to show a unified commitment against racism, why combating racism is such an important issue, particularly for South Africans. These are role models and idols, particularly to young people, and they have a great responsibility in that regard. With regards to the issue of individual rights, that's absolutely correct. But we must not forget that this cricket is a team sport, and it is a team that is representing South Africa. And when they represent South Africa on the global stage, we want them to represent South Africa in the best possible light. And once we explained all of that to the players, and there was some engagement with them on these issues, it was then the players then subsequently agreed that they would indeed take the knee for the remainder of the tournament. So I think it was because of the circumstances we found ourselves in. The decision had to be taken quickly, but once it was explained to the players, I think we've now resolved the issue and we can focus on the game against Sri Lanka on Saturday.
Certainly that conversation would have been very useful if it took place prior to that encounter and not after the fact. But on to my next question. When you were now in discussions with other members of the board and this directive was then issued, did it ever come up in conversation that this may be a bit unfair to spring this up on the players at this very moment in the middle of the World Cup where they really do need immediate results following, of course, that loss to Australia in their first match? Did that come up in the conversations? And I mean, reaching this decision didn't appear to be a matter of urgency before the World Cup. Could CSA then not wait until after the World Cup to come up with this directive? Also just talking to the authenticity of the action from a player perspective.
Well, there are a lot of questions in what you've just said, but let me try and unpack them one by one. Ideally, we would have dealt with this prior to the World Cup, so there was clarity going into the tournament. But as I said right at the beginning, we were leaving it up to the team and the players themselves to try and find a consensus position. Unfortunately, they were unable to do so, and that's why we intervened. And we fully accept that the ideal scenario would be to do that. But we have to deal with the circumstances that we found ourselves in. And the decision of the board was unanimous, a decision taken on Monday night. We were fully cognizant that this was going to be relayed to the team just before a very important game at the World Cup. But, the principal issue of a stance against racism is one that we cannot equivocate on. And particularly as South Africans, we felt it was absolutely critical as a moral principled position that a team representing South Africa clearly demonstrates its opposition to racism to the international community. And when that was explained to the players, they are united in their commitment to combat racism. And all we are asking them to do is to demonstrate it in a way that is more powerful than what they were doing previously.
And that sends a united message to the whole world. As I wrap up with you, just a quick one. What happens now with Quinton? Is he going to play for the remainder of the World Cup? Will there be some sort of disciplinary against him? What is the position at the moment?
No. There's no question of any disciplinary action. This was an engagement with players. As I said, we explained our position. All of the players, including Quinton de Kock, have now agreed that with the directive from the board. So there's no need for this matter to go any further. What we will, however, do is engage further with the players when they return from the World Cup, because this is not a one-off directive. It's about creating an understanding of the importance of fighting racism. And this is an ethos that runs through Cricket South Africa. It's going to run through all of our structures, and our players need to buy into that ethos and value system that we are seeking to put in place.
Mr. Naidoo, thank you so much for availing yourself for the discussion this morning. Have a great day further. That is, of course, the chairperson of Cricket South Africa, Lawson Naidoo, just talking about the Quinton de Kock saga and really saying that he has come onto the page now and everyone is on the same page. Quinton will continue playing for South Africa for the remainder of this T20 World Cup.